You know the name, you've definitely seen the movies, but how much do you really know about Cleopatra? Beyond all the romanticized tales, the dramatic ending, who was the actual woman behind that legend? For so long, her story's been told through some very specific, often Roman lenses.
Exactly. And that's our mission today, really, to dive deep into these sources we've gathered, historical accounts, academic analysis, you name it.
Yeah.
We want to unearth the crucial insights about Cleopatra's life, look at her strategic mind, her multifaceted legacy, and ultimately move past those popular perceptions to understand the real historical figure.
We're pulling out the most important nuggets of knowledge, some surprising facts too, giving you a shortcut, hopefully, to being truly well-informed on one of history's most fascinating leaders. So let's start unpacking.
Okay.
Let's begin with her identity. When we think Cleopatra, we almost automatically picture the Egyptian queen, right? But our sources, they paint a much more nuanced picture of her heritage. What's the first sort of surprising detail here?
Well, I think the fundamental thing to grasp right off the bat is that the Ptolemaic dynasty, the royal line Cleopatra belonged to, she was the last pharaoh. It wasn't native Egyptian, not at all.
Right.
It was founded by Ptolemy I Soter. He was a Macedonian Greek general, one of Alexander the Great's, close companions. So the Ptolemies were distinctly Macedonian Greek in origin, in culture.
That's a huge reframing from the get-go.
Yes.
And it wasn't just their lineage that was Greek, was it? Their official language that mirrored this heritage too.
Absolutely. Ancient Greek, specifically Koine Greek, which was, the common dialect across the Hellenistic world. Back then, that was the official language of the Ptolemaic court.
Okay.
You can see this on really pivotal artifacts like the Rosetta Stone. It's got Greek right there alongside the Egyptian scripts.
Right.
And even their capital, Ptolemaic Alexandria, it functioned more like a Greek polis, a city-state. It was quite distinct from the rest of Egypt. Full citizenship was mainly for Greeks and Macedonians, even though, lots of other groups lived there, native Egyptians, Jewish communities.
And this is where Cleopatra really stands apart from her family, isn't it? She kind of broke the mold.
She absolutely did. Our sources, particularly the ancient historian Plutarch, they highlight that Cleopatra was apparently the only Ptolemaic ruler known to have actually bothered to learn Demotic Egyptian.
The native language.
The native everyday language, yes. Plutarch even talks about her impressive language skills, saying she could talk with lots of different peoples without needing an interpreter.
Wow.
Which really showcases her unique diplomatic skill, her engagement with the Egyptian people. It was totally unlike her predecessors who, sources suggest, gradually abandoned even ancient Macedonian. She was described as much more than just a ruler, a diplomat, but also a naval commander, a linguist, even a medical author.
She sounds like a genuine force of nature. What about her formal titles and how her name might have sounded back then?
Well, her formal titles definitely reflected her divine status. Thea Neoterra, which means the younger goddess. And Philopetris, often translated as loving her country or maybe the father-loving goddess. As for her name, Cleopatra, well, in English today, you hear it pronounced a couple of ways, either with that short A, like Cat Palaszczuk's Patri, or a longer ah sound, like father seized Miss Crane. Ancient pronunciation is harder to pin down exactly, of course.
Right. So moving beyond her, extraordinary background, let's turn to the relationships that really define so much of her reign, especially with the Romans. She seems to have been an absolute master of political maneuvering.
That is the crucial point, really. Cleopatra's strategic genius, if you want to call it that, was her ability to navigate the treacherous, shifting sands of Roman civil war.
Yeah.
For Egypt, it was fundamentally a matter of survival.
Yeah.
Take, for instance, after the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. Antony gains control of the whole Eastern Roman Republic. Suddenly her future, Egypt's future, hinged entirely on how she managed this new power player.
So Antony's consolidating power in the East. What was the strategic imperative then that brought Cleopatra into his orbit? And how did that famous initial meeting in Tarsus actually unfold?
Right, so Antony summons her to Tarsus in the summer of 41 BC. And she didn't just, show up. She arrived spectacularly on her magnificent royal barge, the Thalamagos.
Oh, the famous barge.
Exactly, hosting Antony and his officers for 2 nights of incredibly lavish banquets. Now, her stated goals were pretty clear. Clear up rumors she'd backed his enemies in the Civil War, sort out some territorial disputes in the Levant.
Practical matters.
Practical matters, officially. But, make no mistake, Antony was also very much seeking a personal connection, a romantic one.
And that meeting, it became a pretty powerful demonstration of her political ruthlessness, too, didn't it? Not just charm.
Indeed, it did. I mean, one key insight from this period is her cold pragmatism. She successfully convinced Antony, persuaded him to execute her own exiled sister, Arsinoe IV.
Her sister.
Her sister, yes, at Ephesus. And also her former governor of Cyprus, who had rebelled. This wasn't just, personal spite. It was a clear signal. She was willing to eliminate any and all threats to her power, to her dynasty. Ruthless, but effective.
Then later, we get the donations of Alexandria in 33 BC. I mean, that was an audacious public spectacle. It must have sent absolute shockwaves back to Rome.
Oh, it was incredibly provocative, a truly dramatic public event. You have Cleopatra dressed as the goddess Isis, declaring herself Queen of Kings.
Queen of Kings.
And her son, Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, mind you, as King of Kings. And what's fascinating is how boldly she then staked out claims to vast territories for their other children, too.
Right. Children she had with Antony.
Exactly. Alexander Helios was declared king of Armenia, Media, and Parthia, huge territories. Ptolemy Philadelphus became king of Syria and Cilicia, and Cleopatra Selene II got Crete and Cyrene.
Wow. Just handing out kingdoms.
Pretty much. And our sources also suggest Antony and Cleopatra might have actually gotten married during this ceremony, though it's unclear if it was ever legally recognized by Roman standards. But their coins, significantly, depicted them as a Hellenistic royal couple, equal in power, equal in status.
Octavian, Antony's rival back in Rome, must have been absolutely furious about these territorial claims, the sheer defiance of it all. What was his reaction?
He seized on it immediately. Antony actually sent a report to Rome asking for these donations to be ratified, officially approved. His allies, the consuls, initially tried to suppress it, keep it quiet.
Trying to manage the fallout.
Exactly. But Octavian made sure it got out. He used it brilliantly for propaganda. He launched this full-blown media war against Antony and Cleopatra.
Playing the foreign card.
Absolutely. Constantly stressing her status as a woman, as a foreigner, who dared to challenge Roman authority, who aimed to share Roman power. Even Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, depicts the final battle of Actium as this grand clash of civilizations. Octavian and the Roman gods saving Italy from Cleopatra and the, quote, barbaric, animal-headed gods of Egypt.
Wow.
This propaganda absolutely fueled Roman anger and ultimately led to their naval defeat at Actium in 31 BC.
And after Actium, the endgame was tragically set, her death. It's so often portrayed with just, a snake. But there are far more symbolic layers there than most people realize.
Yeah, her death occurred on August 12th, 30 BC, by our calendar, shortly after Octavian had Caesarion, Cleopatra's son, with Caesar killed.
Ruthless.
The advice reportedly was, it is not good to have too many Caesars. Egypt was then formally annexed, became part of the Roman Republic, but under Octavian's direct personal control, very strategically preventing the Roman Senate from getting its hands on Egypt's immense wealth.
Okay, so the snake. The popular image is just an asp, a viper. But the sources seem to indicate the choice of serpent held a much deeper symbolic meaning, didn't it?
Absolutely. The sources strongly suggest it was far more symbolic than just any random viper. The most probable snake involved was the uraeus, the Egyptian cobra.
Uraeus, okay.
And unlike vipers, or even some other cobras whose bites are painful, often leave visible disfiguring marks, the uraeus bite was said to be relatively painless. It caused rapid paralysis, often without obvious outward signs.
That adds a really profound, almost spiritual layer to her suicide, doesn't it?
It really does. The uraeus was a sacred symbol in Egypt. It represented Wadjet, the cobra goddess of Lower Egypt. It symbolized kingship, divine protection for the pharaohs, and also ideas of immortality, eternity.
Okay.
So by choosing the uraeus, Cleopatra was likely making a powerful statement, symbolizing the end of her dynasty, but on her own terms, preventing a demeaning capture, a public humiliation in Rome.
But Octavian spun it differently.
Exactly. The key insight here is how Octavian, her conqueror, then sought to diminish this act, to strip it of its power. He promoted the image of a common, maybe even squalid viper mite, effectively denying her that symbolic immortality, at least in the eyes of the Roman world, controlling the narrative, even in death.
It's incredible how much of her story, even her death, is shaped by that political narrative. But shifting gears a bit, beyond the politics and personal drama, our sources also highlight a fascinating intellectual and artistic legacy.
Yes, it's easy to focus just on the power plays, but it's remarkable how Cleopatra also understood the power of image, of ideas. She was depicted in all sorts of ancient art styles: Egyptian, Hellenistic, Greek, Roman.
Right.
We have surviving statues, busts, reliefs, coins, even carved cameos depicting her, sometimes with Antony. And it's truly significant that Julius Caesar himself commissioned a gilded bronze statue of her for the Temple of Venus Genetrix in Rome.
In Rome itself.
In Rome, apparently the first time a living person had their statue placed right next to a deity in a Roman temple. And it stayed there for centuries. That's a huge statement.
And there's even a painting, isn't there, in Pompeii? That seems to connect her directly to Roman mythology.
That's right. There's a Roman wall painting, second style, found in the house of Marcus Fabius Rufus at Pompeii. It likely depicts Cleopatra as Venus Genetrix, Venus the Mother, with her son Caesarion portrayed as a little Cupid.
Wow.
It strongly suggests a direct artistic connection, maybe even commissioned by Caesar himself, tying her into Roman foundation myths. And she was also the only female Ptolemy to issue coins just in her own name, sometimes showing herself as Venus Aphrodite.
So she wasn't just a political figure using art, but clearly a patron, maybe even an intellectual herself.
Oh, much more than just a patron, it seems. I mean, the Ptolemaic rulers generally fostered intellectual life in Alexandria, the famous library, for example. But fascinatingly, Cleopatra herself is even attributed with writings on, of all things, cosmetics and beauty. Detailed recipes for hair care, remedies for baldness, dandruff.
No way.
Yes, later quoted by the famous Roman physician Gallienus. It really highlights her intellectual engagement beyond just statecraft, gives us a glimpse into her personal interests, maybe even scientific curiosity.
That's a side of her you almost never hear about. And there's that amazing detail about a handwritten note from her, too, isn't there? Something about a papyrus.
Yes, this is really cool. There's a papyrus document from February 33 BC. It's basically granting a tax exemption to someone. And on it, there's a single word added in Greek. Eustoi, it means something like make it happen or so be it.
Okay.
And it's almost certainly added in Cleopatra's own hand. But what's truly remarkable, almost charming in a way, is that the word contains a tiny, rare spelling error, a little extra letter, an iota adscript that a professional scribe would definitely not have made. Yeah. It's such a small, humanizing detail. It reminds us that even this incredibly powerful, highly educated queen, well, she could still make a little slip up when jotting down an instruction. It kind of brings her down to earth in a surprising way.
That's fantastic. Finally, let's not forget her crucial religious role that was so deeply tied into her claims to power and legitimacy within Egypt, wasn't it?
Absolutely critical. Our sources describe her actively participating in traditional Egyptian religious ceremonies. For instance, she's depicted on something called the Bukian Still.
Okay.
And the stone carving shows her offering gifts and escorting the sacred Buches bull, which was considered the living embodiment of the god Mentu. She even organized a festival, distributed public money.
So very much playing the part of a traditional pharaoh.
Precisely. This isn't just a side note. It vividly demonstrates her crucial religious and political role within Egyptian tradition. It wasn't just about her Roman alliances. She understood her Egyptian power base, too.
So when we put it all together, what does this deep dive truly tell us? It reveals a Cleopatra far, far more complex and, frankly, more fascinating than the standard Hollywood portrayal, doesn't it?
Absolutely. She was a brilliant polyglot, speaking multiple languages, a ruthless politician when she needed to be, a strategic mother, always thinking about her dynasty, an intellectual figure interested in science and writing, and a pivotal religious figure, constantly balancing her Hellenistic Greek heritage with Roman ambitions and these ancient Egyptian traditions.
She was a ruler who meticulously crafted and managed her image, using every single tool she had, from those lavish banquets we talked about to powerful symbolic rituals, even, as we saw, the deliberate choice of her own death.
Exactly. All to maintain her power and secure her legacy in a world that was rapidly changing, increasingly dominated by Roman expansion. Understanding her story really helps us see how ancient power, politics, cultural identity, how they all intertwined in these profound and often really surprising ways.
Okay, here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to mull over. Given her exceptional political savvy, her clear intellectual depth, and that unique ability she had to bridge cultures, what more could Cleopatra have achieved? How might the ancient world itself have looked different, if not for those relentless Roman expansionist ambitions that ultimately ended her reign and her dynasty? Something to think about.